Let's supplement what you just said with a little clip from Kevin O'Connell earlier this week, and then we will react to what he had to say on the other side. Here's O'Connell talking about Cousins taking charge of the offense.
You know, obviously in a new system, somebody's got to take charge out there. And for us, that's Kirk. And obviously he's sitting front and center in every meeting. He's asking questions, both in the quarterback room, in front of the unit. He was one of the guys that I mentioned in the team meeting yesterday, speaking up and kind of really getting involved. And from everything I'm hearing about what's going on the grass with Josh and Tyler's group out there, he's been great, leading the charge. They're throwing routes. They're doing different things that we're teaching in the classroom. And, you know, I think the phase one is really kind of set up for somebody like Kirk to kind of take the reins and run with it. And then the best thing is we get to start being out there with him next week.
How different is it to have a head coach who talks about Kirk like that in comparison to the way Mike Zimmer used to talk about Kirk?
Well, with Mike, it was kind of age old, you know, and Mike, you know, Mike is and or was a throwback to like Bill Parcells and stuff like that. So, I mean, getting effusive praise out of Mike really about anybody, I mean, that was really hard to do. And I did a radio show with him weekly during the season for 8 years. But it's different. It's new age in that when I say new age, the importance of, and this is good. Okay. I'm not, you know, making it sound all touchy feely or anything. This generally speaking is good. Just having just really concern or care for the totality of the human being and just talking about life and doing things like that. And Kevin and the staff are really good at that. And, you know, maybe the previous head coach wasn't great at that, but Mike, don't forget back in 2017 with Zim, you know, we go to Washington and beat Cousins and we're kind of killing them. And then Case throws back-to-back interceptions, and at least one of them went for a pick six. They both might have gone to the end zone. So now all of a sudden Washington's in the game. We eventually win the game. And I mean, Keenum has been our quarterback now half the season after Bradford got hurt, you know, and Teddy's on the mend and Bradford's on the mend. And Mike had a Monday press conference. We're playing St. Louis the next week, and that's McVay's St. Louis Rams, Keenum's former team as of 2016. And Mike would not commit to Case playing quarterback in that game. And man, it just bugged a lot of people. So, you know, I think that kind of daggers what you're saying about the difference between the two. With Kwesi and Kevin, there's a collaboration between those two. It's a collaboration of kindness, where they're just opening their eyes and their minds to a lot of different things about these players and their lives and this era and this generation and pandemic or post-pandemic, however you want to look at it. And that's great. And it's galvanizing, but we haven't played any games. So when we start playing these games and it gets a little hot, you know, that's when I'm excited to see what happens and how people react.
Cousins had the Vikings over the contractual barrel earlier this year. He was signed for one more season, cap number of $45 million, salary fully guaranteed of $35 million. He eventually did a one-year extension, which created some flexibility, but it doesn't answer any long-term questions. Then he says he wants to retire a Viking. I don't know that I buy it because his contract doesn't scream out retire as a Viking. How do you see this playing out between Cousins and the team coming up this year and next year and maybe beyond?
Well, it's a fascinating topic, you know, and then on the radio show, despite you absolutely painting me as a cross between Harry Carey and Bob Uecker as a homer, I will go down the road of I am a fan of the Minnesota Vikings drafting a quarterback higher than people think, knowing he's not going to play. And if Kirk doesn't dig it, Kirk doesn't dig it. But Kirk has the sledgehammer right now. And that's okay because Kirk's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL if you really want to break it down. And having somebody like Kirk is somebody with whom you can win a lot of games. But there just has been no flexibility behind him. Mannion comes in that Packers game last year, and it was a disaster, with all due respect to Sean, because he doesn't get any reps. Then you get, you know, everybody's negative on Kellen Mond from the previous regime. I heard so many times he can't play. And so much so that it offended me, but I'm not going to argue with them because these coaches know 1,000 times more about it than I'll ever know. But it's tough for me to believe you can look at Kellen Mond and say, hey, he's out there running the scout team, never throwing to JJ, never handing off to Dalvin. and he's not even running the plays, and he can't play. Meanwhile, when we're on the road, he's on my bus when we go to the stadium, and we had assigned seats, so he would sit like right in front of me, and he'd be into his tablet just memorizing and writing and taking tests, and so the kid's trying hard. So, when Kwesi was hired, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the GM, one of the first things I said 9 to noon was the A topic for me is figuring out if Kellen Mond can play, because, there are members of the previous regime who didn't think he could play. And but you don't do at Texas A&M what he did if you just have no skills. So I'm curious to see how that works in the offseason. But Kirk holds the sledgehammer here with the negotiating, and at times it can put the team in a weird spot.
Doesn't what you said about Kellen Mond, though, when the front office makes him a third-round pick, members of the coaching staff constantly say he can't play, doesn't that speak to a level of dysfunction that helps explain why the Wolves decided to hit the reset button? They did a good job of hiding the dysfunction until things really got hectic last year, and I think there was a lot of infighting. One guy blaming the other guy, front office blaming the coaching staff, and vice versa. But I was surprised to learn how much acrimony there was. But the Mond situation seems to be the perfect example of it on the roster, where the front office clearly thought a lot of him and the coaching staff clearly didn't. And the coaching staff wasn't bashful about saying what they thought was the right thing to say.
Well, having done this as long as I have, and knowing a lot of people around the league who either used to work here or I've just met them, like through the combine or whatever, that, it's, hey, why don't you, we can block the quarterback if you draft me an effing offensive lineman. Okay, so that happens a lot. And it's happened. I've just heard it and known about it for many, many years calling games. So it's almost flippant. It's almost just throw it away. It's elevator music. It's just people voicing frustration. I think same thing with the Kellen situation. It's like, I wouldn't take it as he can't play as an absolute condemnation on the young man's career. I just think it was born of a lot of frustration when I would hear it. But they also would realize that he wasn't getting ample opportunity because of his role on the team. When it comes to dysfunction within the franchise, being as close to it as I am, again, I mean, whether it's Zim or Leslie Frazier or Chili or Mike Tice, you just see and hear a lot of things where I've learned over the years that you can't take 92% of them as gridiron gospel. Yeah, a lot of it's born of exaltation. A lot of it is born of frustration, but with Kellen, there was just a level of frustration that I just didn't really understand when he wasn't really getting a chance. But then again, they know 1,000 times more about it than I ever will. The majority, if not all of them, are gone. And now you have a former quarterback taken in the 3rd round as your head coach. You have Bum's grandkid as your offensive coordinator. The work McVay did with Jared Goff to get them to the Super Bowl in 2017. Granted, none of these guys were around, but they're from that tree, and that tree of being able to work through conflict like that. And I'm just really curious to see where it goes with Kellen and where it goes with Kirk, and where JJ's cash goes with what like Tyreek and Devontae are getting and stuff like that. So we're in very interesting times here with Minnesota Vikings football, but they do have the advantage of unpredictability on their side. And you and I chatted about this Wednesday on my radio show in the cornfields with, we haven't run a 3-4 base defense here in 40 years. So they're going to have a 3-4 base defense with some new players. And the offense, if you look at the Rams offense, they don't really use a fullback. We have one of the best fullbacks in the NFL here in CJ Ham. Irv Smith Jr., he's supposed to be a really good tight end, but he's coming off a really big injury. KJ Osborne splashed last year and was dynamic, but his first year, he didn't catch a pass. So this is kind of not a make or break, but rubber meets the road year for him. Adam Thielen is definitely in the second half of his career. So the offense is dead set to be really, really good, specifically with that tackles tandem, man. I mean, Darisaw missed some games last year, but, he came into the season hurt. O'Neal is either the or one of the very best right tackles in the NFL. So now when you have a tackle tandem like that, that's a legitimate building block to do some damage. And you got an offensive-minded coach who's going to come in here with new ideas. I'm really, really excited for it.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.